We are a continent that is moving as a continent, and what happens in Sierra Leone is important to any person who is sitting in Zimbabwe, who is sitting in Nairobi, Kenya. And one of the reasons why you call people, for some of us, and I think Francis mentioned this, is not the salary. We could be sitting in our little law offices and practicing law anonymously. When you see people coming out and speaking and moving from country to country in Africa and in different parts of the world, crusading about corruption, it means it is resident in their hearts and minds. It means that there is something that touches them and that they are putting their lives on the line. And when people leave their comfort zone and they come and share things with you, they have a contribution to make. So your duty is to ensure that you also make your contribution. And if each one of us make our contribution, that is what we do in the fight against corruption. That does not say that there will not be people who are negative. There are people in the world who, for every solution, as the wise man said, they have a problem. For such people, we'll continue to pray for you. But we will continue our crusade nevertheless. God bless.
I agree.
Let me say that part of the message that we have been carrying across the continent of Africa, and as you've rightly said, in the world, is to remind ourselves that Africa could have been in a better place if the resources of the continent were deployed for the benefit of the people of Africa in the area of education, in the area of health, in the area of infrastructure, and in the area of agriculture, so that Africa could feed herself, educate our people, make our people a little healthy, and therefore improve household incomes, and by extension, therefore make the continent a lot more competitive. And I hold the view that one of the things that has stood in the way of the realization of that dream is the privatization of public wealth by individuals who do not mean well for the continent, and to have these resources kept in different parts of the world. And I think that the more we speak about and against corruption, and therefore plant in people's minds the truth that corruption is not a victimless crime, we are able to tell the people who are in Freetown, Sierra Leone, the people who are in Bangui in the Central African Republic, that when you go to hospital and you don't find medicine, is because somebody who had the obligation to provide that medicine took away the money and bought a flat in Milan in Italy. If you go to agriculture and you have fertilizers that is not good, is somebody abused their office. And we think that this is the kind of message that should be repeated time and time again, so that people are able to appreciate that corruption indeed, number one, undermines democracy, and number two, undermines economic development, and number three, also has a negative impact on social cohesion. Let me say that one of the things that makes the fight against corruption a difficult one is the absence of political goodwill. If there is no political goodwill, then it becomes very difficult to fight corruption. Remember, there is this wrong perception that the war against corruption can't be won by individuals or by an anti-corruption body. If you take any anti-corruption body, take for example the anti-corruption body here in Sierra Leone, I don't think they have more than 300 personnel who are dealing with 7 million people in Sierra Leone. The fight against corruption in Sierra Leone, and indeed in any country in Africa and in the world, is the fight for everybody. Everybody in their little corner must ensure that they contribute positively in the fight against corruption. Number two, the people must also be intolerant towards people who engage in corruption. And this is why I've said times without number that in order to fight against corruption, we must introduce hygiene in our politics. How do we elect men and women into public office? If you want men and women who seek political office to bribe us, then we are telling them that once you get into public office, then you have a license and the freedom to abuse your office. So the electorate must also wake up, and wake up in a manner that informs their action. And number three, that we must have systems that operate so that we prevent corruption. There is a sense in which the drama that accompanies arrest and prosecution is what people think is the fight against corruption. That is only a small aspect of it. The fight against corruption is about educating the people, and the people beginning to appreciate that corruption is something that is harmful to them, and also to create an environment where the ability to engage in corrupt activities is diminished. So in a nutshell, I'm saying that the fight against corruption is not an easy one. When you enter into that office, you lose friends. When you enter into that office, you'll be accused of many things. People will accuse you personally of being corrupt simply because you're in the fight against corruption. There are people who on a daily basis are going to use, particularly in these days of Twitter and social media, there are people who will use that medium to discourage you. There are people who will use that medium to dampen your spirit. There are people who will concoct stories about and against those who are involved in the fight against corruption. But the spirit is never say die. The spirit is that you must fight corruption, knowing that corruption will fight back. And when you do that, and you have a clean conscience, there is a sense in which you will, in the fullness of time, through personal lifestyle, demonstrate to these individuals that you are right. The fight against corruption is winnable. But let us ask ourselves, what does winnable mean? Does it mean that corruption is eliminated and therefore we are living in heaven where everything is good and all we say is hallelujah? No. We are saying that we can fight corruption and ensure that corruption is the exception other than the rule. In countries where we say that corruption is minimal, for example, if we cite in Africa countries such as Botswana, countries such as Mauritius, to a certain extent countries such as Rwanda, we are not saying that corruption has been totally eliminated. We are simply saying that corruption is the exception other than the rule. In countries where corruption has a monumental negative impact, the unfortunate reality is corruption is the rule and is dominant and is present in every sector. We have already seen since the coming into office of the current president of Sierra Leone and the coming into office of the new crop of leaders in the anti-corruption sector in Sierra Leone, a number of things have happened. The public now recognizes that the president is committed in the fight against corruption, which is a good thing. That does not mean that the president does not have detractors. He will always have them, even when he means well. But what that means, number one, is that there is political goodwill. When you have political goodwill, then the arms of the anti-corruption authority is strengthened. And when it is strengthened, then they have public acceptance. When they have public acceptance, it means that the judiciary also responds in a positive way. And when it responds in a positive way, then people are punished. And when people are punished, then the people know that there are consequences when you engage in corrupt activities. And when you do that, then people are afraid. And when people are afraid, then they are reluctant to engage in corruption. To that extent, therefore, corruption is winnable in that sense. And that is what we aspire to do. And one of the things that I keep on saying, in a country where corruption is being fought and fought effectively, an anti-corruption authority should work itself out of office so that in 20 years from today, it will not be necessary to have an anti-corruption authority because corruption will have been reduced to a very minimal level, and it will not be necessary to have a body dedicated to the fight against corruption because the people themselves will be the warriors in the fight against corruption. Africa. Let it be known that when individuals such as myself are invited to a country such as Sierra Leone or indeed any country, We do not come to such countries because we know better than they do. We do not come to Sierra Leone because we have solutions. We do not come to Sierra Leone to pontificate. We do not come to Sierra Leone to prescribe. We do not come to Sierra Leone to pretend to have this magic wand which, upon being waved, solves all the problems of Sierra Leone. We come here to share our thoughts. We come here to energize the people. We come here to remind our kin and kith in Sierra Leone that in this fight we are together. We come here to tell them and to remind them that there are people out there who wish them well, and that these ideas that we have combined with their own will cross-fertilize, or if you may, will cross-pollinate their very own, which may indeed be superior. And in that way, you borrow knowledge, you borrow experience. We are able to share the mistakes that we have made so that they become learning points. We are able to share some of the difficulties that we have experienced so that they are able to learn from them. That is what we come to do, and that is what I will do, to share my thoughts in the knowledge that I have no monopoly of knowledge nor wisdom. First of all, the problems of corruption are already diagnosed. We know the impact of corruption. All of us know the impact of corruption in different sectors, in people's lives, in agriculture, in health, in education, in infrastructure, and in very many other areas that affect the people, the young people who cannot find jobs. We are able to trace their current plight because there has been a history of men and women who occupied public office who did not use public office in a proper manner. So we are not going to be prescriptive because that would be arrogant. We are not going to be diagnostic because we already know the problem. We are simply going to remind the people of Sierra Leone, as we remind ourselves and Africans, that there is a battle to be fought and that we are all soldiers in the field. Beyond that, let me not take the thunder from the conversation I have this evening. And my view is that our duty individually and collectively is to remind ourselves that engaging in corruption is not only harmful to me and others, but harmful to this generation and generations yet to be born. Once we are alive to that reality, once we are able to connect our plight with the corrupt activities that we engage in and which we have normalized, because in countries where corruption is rampant, the absurd has become normal. The duty of the anti-corruption authority is to remind us every so often that what you think is normal is abnormal, and therefore we ought to go back to the past, go back to the basics, morally rearm ourselves. And that when we morally rearm ourselves, we'll then be able to recognize that what we are engaged in is harmful. As I sometimes say a little bit dramatically, the beauty of a guest is that he comes to your house and is able to point at a cobweb which you long thought was part of your furniture, and he reminds you that that is not your furniture, it's a cobweb. Then you look at it a little bit more keenly and you say, behold, a cobweb, and then you remove it. Perhaps that is the role that I'm going to play. And if I play that role in a modest way, that will be my contribution. That will be part of the crusade that we are holding. But we are saying so in humility, and we are also going to point out the areas where we ourselves have made mistakes in the past, because we have made mistakes. And if we have made mistakes, we should not then sink into the ground simply because we have made mistakes. We are able to then say, we made this mistake. Don't repeat it. It is a learning point. That is why you call people, not because they are angels who have no mistakes in their lives. No, it's because they are human beings, and in their daily transaction they may have engaged in activities, and they are able by reason of experience to say, this path, we thought it was the right path, But when we followed it, we recognized that it was not the right path. Don't take it. Take another path. That is why sharing experience is very important going forward, so that people learn from the mistakes you made and the successes that you scored, and all those factors conjoined then energizes you going forward. And that is the contribution that we expect to make.
Commissioner.
One of the beautiful things that I now see in Africa is the recognition in every African country that corruption is a cancer in our lives and that we have to fight. That you find everywhere. Everybody you talk to in the political class tells you that unless we deal with corruption and deal corruption a death blow, then it continues to undermine us, not only within the country, but amongst the Committee of Nations. And one of the things that I find quite attractive is that since the coming into office of the administration of President Bio and the appointment of the new office, the enthusiasm with which the fight against corruption has been renewed, the conviction rates, the recoveries, is beginning to send a clear message to the people that the fight is being fought with renewed energy. And I think the Commissioner Francis has said it very well. It is too early to judge the winner of a marathon race after 100 meters. This is a marathon race. It is too early to suggest to the people that the fight has been won. And it must be that we remind the people that this is your fight. In fact, what I love about the clarion call of the Anti-Corruption Authority in Sierra Leone is to remind the people that this is your war. You are not spectators in this war. It is. We are simply providing the leadership in this war. And once we do that, I think we are in a good space. And I hold the view that the Anti-Corruption Authority is in the right place. They are at the right pace. They need to be energized. They need to be supported. They need to be encouraged. And if that is done and done consistently, then in a few years' time, we'll be able to say, yes, they served well. Sometimes the gains and the results we expect may not be as dramatic as we expect them. Sometimes they may not even occur in our lifetime. But our joy is that we have started the fight. You know, at one time when I heard the word witch hunt, I said, there are no witches and there are no hunters. What we are dealing with are individuals who have chosen to use their public office or to misuse their offices, and therefore they come on the radar of the law and they have got to be dealt with in accordance with the law. And once there is that awareness amongst the people, then nobody will talk about witch hunt, because there will be a body of evidence which every rational person looking at will say, this evidence, holding all factors constant, simply revealed that this individual has engaged in behavior which is corrupt. If you earn 1 million leones and you within that same period acquire a property which is 1 billion leones, unless you are a magician, we cannot explain your behavior. And even when you shout that you are being hunted for no reason, the evidence will be shouting back and saying, you are lying. And I think that is what is important in this regard. Remember, whenever you speak the truth, you attract enemies. Remember, when you say certain things loudly, there are people who are against you. Once you are aware of that thing, you continue on the right path. I think it is one great person who used to say that when you turn back to throw stones at every dog that barks against you, you'll never make progress. As long as you are clear that you're on the right path, you move ahead because the law supports you and the people will support you, and you do the right thing, and the evidence will be visible, not immediately, but a little later. The verdict of the success of a fight against corruption is known later, long after those who fought the war have gone. It is history that will immortalize their contribution and success. Once they know that, they will continue to do the right thing, and they'll block their ears to all the negativity that attends the fight against corruption. All right. This is a land that has great history. This is a land that has resources that are unmatched in many parts of the world. This is a land that, if it were to realize our potential, would be a land to which we would be coming to learn many things. This is a land that has a rich history. This is a land that, if you travel in her, you see the potential in agriculture. This is a land that has mineral resources. This is a land that has produced men and women that have met in different parts of the world. This is a land that could make a contribution not only to her people, but to West Africa and to the continent of Africa. This is a land with a rich history. This is a land with character. This is a land that, if it does well, Africa will do well.